Hello. My name is Arlena Wynn, and on what should have been the happiest day of my life, they handed me a $40,000 bill, edited me out of the wedding photos, and turned my walk down the aisle into a viral meme with pig sounds. The envelope was thick, heavy enough to feel important, gold trim, glossy paper, the kind of thing meant to impress. But when I turned it over, the letters carved into the surface made my stomach drop. Preston Gage and his bride. Not even my name. Not even a courtesy hyphen. Just his bride. Like a placeholder someone forgot to fill in. I read it 3 times, waiting for the mistake to fix itself. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe my mother's secretary mixed things up. But then I saw the guest list attached. Everybody else had their full names printed elegantly. Even the florist and the photographer. Just not me. I held the card between my fingers until the edges curled. The paper was beautiful, expensive, and absolutely indifferent. 2 nights before the wedding, I stood at the entrance of the rehearsal dinner. The smell of roasted garlic and champagne filled the air. Laughter rippled across the hall like a current I wasn't part of. My heels clicked too loudly against the marble floor. Someone at the registration table looked up, then back down, scanning the list. "Name, please," the woman asked. "Arlena Wynn." She frowned, scrolling. "Might have a Preston Gage. And let me see his bride. That must be you." Her tone made it sound like a question, not a fact. I nodded, because correcting her would have taken more strength than I had. Inside, the room gleamed. Tall vases, linen cloths, laughter so loud it felt choreographed. I searched for my name card, weaving between tables where people stopped me only long enough to ask where Preston was. At the far end of the room, near the kitchen doors, a young staffer waved at me. "Miss, you're here. Seat 28. I blinked at the card in front of the chair. It read simply, "Bride," the font smaller than everyone else's. The spot smelled faintly of bleach and overcooked shrimp. Every few seconds the kitchen doors swung open behind me, letting out bursts of clattering trays and laughter from staff. I pulled out my own chair. No one looked up. Preston stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by his colleagues from the agency. Handsome in his tailored jacket, charming the crowd with a grin that used to belong only to me. My mother, Lorraine, sat beside him, her pearls glinting under the light. When our eyes met, she smiled and mouthed, "Perfect evening." I smiled back because it was easier than frowning. My dress caught on the chair leg when I sat down, a small tear audible enough to make me freeze. Nobody turned. I laughed quietly to myself, though nothing was funny. Celine appeared out of nowhere, gliding toward me with her champagne glass half full. "They didn't forget you, you know," she said, tilting her head. Voice sweet but sharp. "It's just logistics. You hate the spotlight anyway, don't you?" Her lipstick, rose coral, was the same shade I picked out for my makeup trial. She hadn't asked. She never did. I didn't say I hated it. I murmured. Celine shrugged, her shoulders graceful, deliberate. "Well, Mom said you looked overwhelmed, so they thought this seat might feel calmer." Calmer. Near the ice bucket. Near the kitchen exit. Away from the laughter. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. When she left, I watched the condensation form around the metal bucket beside me. Droplets slid down, pooling onto the tablecloth until the fabric darkened. The chill reached my fingertips when I brushed against it. Even in this crowded room, I felt colder than anyone else. Preston raised his glass. "To family," he said, loud enough for the microphones. "To unity, and to the woman who makes me look good every day." Everyone cheered. He didn't look at me when he said it. My mother squeezed his arm with pride, as if she were the one being toasted. For a moment, I thought about standing up, walking out, reminding them whose wedding this actually was. But then someone called for a toast from Celine, and my name vanished again beneath her voice. She tapped the glass, smiled that camera-perfect smile. We're just so proud of our Preston. He's worked so hard, and tomorrow's going to be magic. Applause followed. My throat tightened. My name stayed unspoken, floating somewhere between the kitchen door and the trash bin where servers tossed napkins soaked in melted ice water. I reached for my purse, pretending to check my phone. The screen was black, reflection harsh under the fluorescent light. My face looked pale, expressionless, like someone attending a stranger's event. From across the room, my mother laughed, her head tilted back the same way Celine's did. The resemblance was cruel. When the waiter came by, I ordered sparkling water. He hesitated. Everyone else is drinking white wine, ma'am. It's included. I said water. I replied, maybe too fast. His smile faltered, and he hurried away. I didn't care. My palms were slick against the glass when he returned with it. Preston passed by once, hand resting casually on my shoulder. Having fun, sweetheart? His cologne lingered a second too long. Sure, I said, voice steady but thin. He didn't wait for the answer. He was already halfway to another conversation, another group of admirers laughing at a story I probably told him first. The waiter returned with dessert, mini cheesecakes, each one topped with a gold flake. Mine was missing the garnish. Small mistake, maybe. Or maybe not. I stared at the plate until the edges blurred. The noise around me dimmed. My chest rose and fell, steady but shallow. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the jazz playing near the stage. Someone at the next table said, "She's so lucky." And another voice answered, "He could have had anyone." I swallowed. The water tasted metallic, like melted ice and regret. Celine's laughter drifted from the center of the room, mingling with Preston's deep voice. They looked radiant under the warm light, matching, synchronized, practiced. The program ended. Guests began to leave. Chairs scraped. The room smelled of perfume and exhaustion. I stood slowly, my legs stiff. My chair left an imprint on the carpet, darker than the rest. I traced it with my eyes until it disappeared under someone's shadow. Preston approached briefly to shake hands with the event manager. "See you tomorrow, love," he said without glancing my way. Lorraine kissed my cheek, barely touching. "Don't overthink everything," she whispered. "Tomorrow it's all about the family name. Be graceful." Her perfume was powdery and suffocating. I nodded again, because nodding was what I did best. As they left, I sat back down for a moment, staring at the empty glasses, the melting ice, the faint ring of moisture spreading across the linen. My reflection shimmered in it, blurred, fragile, easy to wipe away. The lights dimmed. Staff began clearing the tables, moving around me like I was furniture. I folded the invitation, pressed the sharp edges into my palm until it hurt enough to feel real. Even in the coldest corner of the room, I was still the one making it colder. I wasn't the guest of honor. I was the footnote with good posture. The night wind on the rooftop tasted like metal and champagne. Strings of warm lights hung above us, glowing against the Denver skyline. I was still in the same blue gown I'd worn at the rehearsal, the fabric stiff with invisible judgment. No one had given me time to change. My fingers were swollen from dehydration and nerves, but no one noticed that either. The crowd was louder tonight, Preston's clients, family friends, people who didn't know me but acted as if they did. My mother's voice floated somewhere near the bar, practiced and polished, talking about how our family was finally expanding. I stood near the edge of the rooftop, one hand resting on the cool railing, my engagement ring glinting under the light. It suddenly looked too small, like it belonged to a different woman. Preston appeared behind me, charming as ever. His smile was the kind that made strangers adore him and made me feel invisible. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, slipping an arm around my waist. "Let's give them a show, huh? A little preview of tomorrow." Before I could ask what he meant, he raised his voice for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, quick rehearsal. Let's see if this ring still fits." The crowd turned toward us, grinning, phones already raised. My pulse spiked. "Preston, not now." He laughed, the sound echoing too easily. "Come on, it's just fun." He held out his hand, waiting. The ring gleamed between his fingers. I reached for it, feeling every eye on me. My hands trembled slightly. He slid it over my knuckle, but it stopped halfway. "Oh," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I guess someone's been celebrating early." A few chuckles spread around the rooftop, polite and cruel all at once. I tried again, pushing the ring, my skin whitening under the pressure. It wouldn't budge. Preston shook his head with that mock-sympathetic tone that made my stomach twist. "Guess I overestimated your fitness goals." The laughter grew louder, mingling with the clinking of glasses. I felt my throat tighten, my chest hollowing out. I wanted to say something sharp, something to slice through the noise, but my mother beat me to it. Lorraine raised her champagne flute, smiling as though she were saving me. "At least her heart's big," she said lightly. "That should count for something." More laughter. Warmer this time, because cruelty always sounds friendly when it comes from a mother. I forced a smile. "That's good to know," I managed. My voice barely carried. Celine, radiant in her crimson dress, leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You really should have sized up. The swelling gets worse when you're anxious." She smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that feels like a hand pressing down on your throat. I nodded because any other reaction would have caused a scene. The photographer snapped a picture just as Preston kissed my temple, his hand resting casually on my hip. The camera flash made everything look fake and permanent. The ring still wouldn't move. My finger throbbed, a steady pulse beneath the gold. If I cried, they'd say I was dramatic. If I smiled, they'd think I agreed. So I smiled. Preston turned to the crowd again. "Looks like we'll have to resize it after the honeymoon. Or skip dessert tonight," Celine added. Everyone laughed, even my mother. I looked at the city lights in the distance, small and flickering, like candles about to die. My cheeks hurt from holding the expression steady. My jaw ached from pretending to belong here. The waiter approached with a tray of drinks, stopping just long enough for me to catch my reflection in the silver. My eyes looked glassy, detached. My lips moved before I realized I was speaking. "It's too tight." Preston leaned closer. "What's that?" "The ring," I said quietly. "It doesn't fit." He smirked. "You'll make it fit. You always do." That sentence hit harder than the laughter, because he was right. I always forced myself into spaces that didn't want me. I turned away, slipping the ring off. My skin beneath it was red, a perfect mark around the bone. I rolled it between my fingers, feeling the weight of gold that didn't feel like commitment, only control. Lorraine noticed and frowned slightly. "Don't take it off, darling. It looks ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word floated through my chest like smoke. I placed the ring in a champagne flute on the table beside me. The gold glimmered against the bubbles, sinking slowly until it rested at the bottom. No one noticed except Celine, who raised an eyebrow and whispered something to my mother. "Everything okay?" Edgar asked from across the bar, voice booming, the kind of man who mistook volume for authority. "Perfect," Preston answered for me. Just a little too much excitement for my bride. His bride. Not Arlena. Never Arlena. Applause followed. I didn't hear the words anymore, just the clatter of plates, the hum of conversation returning to normal. People moved on, the way they always do after someone else's embarrassment. I walked toward the far edge of the rooftop, the air cooler there. My hands still tingled from where the ring had been. A soft breeze tugged my hair, carrying laughter from behind me. Celine's voice floated through the noise. She's always been sensitive. I closed my eyes. The metal railing pressed cold against my palm. The city stretched endlessly below, indifferent and bright. Someone touched my shoulder. Preston again. "Hey, don't sulk. They were just joking." "I know," I said, though my voice sounded foreign. He smiled, satisfied with my obedience, and walked away. The music changed to something slower, more elegant. My mother danced with Edgar near the center of the floor. They looked proud, composed, like royalty surveying their heirs. I picked up a flute of champagne, the one holding the ring, and watched the bubbles rise. The ring sat at the bottom, catching the light with every tilt. I thought about leaving it there, walking away, letting someone else find it, and wonder who had the courage to drop it. Instead, I set the glass down carefully on the nearest tray and walked toward the elevator. No one stopped me. Inside, the air smelled faintly of flowers and floor polish. My reflection in the mirrored wall was pale and precise. My finger was bare, a thin indentation marking where belonging used to be. The elevator chimed softly as it descended. I could still hear laughter above me, distant but sharp, echoing down like the memory of applause. Maybe the ring wasn't too tight. Maybe it was warning me I didn't belong here. The door to the bridal suite creaked as I pushed it open, the hinges slow and deliberate, like they were warning me to turn back. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, washing the room in a hazy glow that made everything feel too soft, too quiet. I had expected steamers humming, a glass of orange juice on the vanity, maybe my mother fussing over centerpieces, but instead, the room was empty except for the dress hanging like a monument. It looked familiar and foreign all at once. The neckline was wrong. The once gentle V I had chosen now stretched into a conservative, suffocating scoop. The waist was tighter. The fabric pulled taut in a way that would punish any breath. I blinked, thinking maybe it was the light, or that I was imagining things. But the zipper was still half open, the tailor's threads still visible. It hadn't just been steamed. It had been altered. My hands shook as I reached for the hanger. The tag was still there. A win. But the silhouette no longer belonged to me. It belonged to someone else. Someone they'd rather I become. "Morning, hon." The stylist walked in, too casual, holding a coffee cup like she wasn't complicit. "Your mom came by early," said the neckline didn't quite reflect the family image. Family image. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste metal. I didn't ask her why she hadn't called me first. I already knew the answer. It wasn't her call to make. And apparently, it wasn't mine either. I stepped into the dress with the same numbness people feel before surgery. Necessary but painful. The zipper caught halfway up, digging into my ribs. I gasped softly, trying not to wince. The stylist offered no help. Just a shrug. You look more polished this way. Strong silhouette, classic bride. Less risky. She left before I could respond. Maybe she thought silence meant approval. Maybe she didn't care. I stood in front of the mirror, unable to breathe fully. My reflection stared back, foreign and edited. The gown hugged too tight. My arms pinned by seams I didn't agree to. My skin itched beneath the lace. I shifted my weight slightly, trying to find space that didn't exist. They reshaped the dress so I wouldn't reshape the narrative. I whispered it aloud. The sentence didn't sound like mine. It sounded like something borrowed, like the dress. The chapel echoed with low murmurs as I walked in for the final run-through. The pews were half filled with vendors, family, coordinators moving like chess pieces. I felt every eye shift toward me, and then away again, as if I were just another detail to approve. Celine stood at the altar. She held a microphone. She was already mid-sentence, her voice smooth and rehearsed. And finally, we're just so grateful for everyone's love and support. Tomorrow will be magical, and we can't wait to share it with all of you. I stopped halfway down the aisle. The coordinator looked up from his clipboard, startled. Oh, Miss Wynn. Celine's just filling in for the bride's gratitude speech. She's such a natural at public moments. It'll make everything smoother. My mother sat in the front row, legs crossed, eyes sharp. She nodded once, like a judge granting permission. My name wasn't on the schedule. Celine's was. Celine turned toward me, her smile wide, camera ready. You looked great in the new cut, she said under her breath. Very classic. I didn't reply. My lungs felt like they were folding into themselves. First the dress. Now the voice. What part of this wedding is still mine? I stood there long enough for someone to clear their throat. The coordinator gestured gently. Miss Wynn, we'll go from the ring exchange next, if that's all right. I nodded, because nodding was expected. I took a seat in the back pew instead of walking to the front. Nobody corrected me. Nobody noticed. The rehearsal moved forward, but I was somewhere else entirely. Not in body, but in thought. Floating behind the glass walls of my own decisions, wondering how I had arrived here, watching my sister speak the words meant for me, wearing a dress I no longer recognized, breathing half-measured, so the seams wouldn't tear. Can you believe she let them do that? Someone whispered a few rows up. The voice was female, familiar. Celine's friend, maybe. Another spectator. Another person who saw what was happening and mistook my silence for consent. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to cry. Not because crying was weakness, but because it would make them feel better. Like I had finally accepted my role. Like I was overwhelmed with joy, not grief. I stood before the ceremony ended. My heels clicked loudly on the wooden floor as I walked out. No one called after me. The doors didn't slam, and the world didn't stop spinning. The only thing that broke was whatever belief I still held that this wedding had anything to do with me. Outside, the sun was too bright. It felt like the day hadn't earned this much light. I sat on the stone bench beside the chapel, inhaling slowly, then again, deeper this time. The seams of the dress pinched, a reminder that even breathing came at a cost. A pigeon landed near my feet, oblivious and free. It pecked at nothing, flapped once and flew off again. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Inside, the laughter resumed. Celine's voice carried, crisp and bright. Applause followed. My mother laughed. Preston's name was spoken like a brand. My absence was unnoticed, or worse, convenient. Maybe they're not trying to make me beautiful. Maybe they're just trying to make me disappear. The garden behind the venue smelled of cut grass and damp roses. It was quiet enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning units, the faint buzz of bees circling the flower beds. I had come outside to breathe, to pull the seams of my dress away from my ribs, to remind myself I still had lungs. The chapel windows glowed behind me, voices floating in and out. Celine laughing, my mother giving directions, Preston talking to the photographer like the star of a film no one else was paid to be in. I walked back toward the prep hall, holding my skirt slightly off the ground. The corridor leading to the dressing rooms was lined with white lilies, all carefully arranged by someone else's hand. As I passed the mirror at the corner, I caught my reflection and almost didn't recognize it. The woman in the glass had perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect restraint. She also looked like she'd stopped belonging hours ago. The door to the groom's room stood slightly open. Preston's voice came through, low and casual. I didn't mean to stop, but something in his tone, too familiar, too smooth, rooted me there. "I told you it'd be fine," he said, laughter soft behind the words. "She'll go along with anything. She always does." Then another voice, higher, teasing. "You always did know how to pick the compliant ones." Celine. My heart hit once, then twice, hard enough to hurt. I didn't push the door open. I didn't need to. The moment hung in the air, invisible but poisonous. I stepped back before they could see me, but when Preston emerged, adjusting his tie, I caught it. The smell, grapefruit and vanilla, her perfume. I stared at him. She was in there. He smiled easily. "Celine, she just stopped by to wish me luck." The way he said it, without shame, without pause, made my stomach twist. "Right? To wish you luck. In private." He tilted his head. "Don't make this into something. You're tired." I looked at his collar. The fabric gleamed slightly where her lipstick must have brushed it. "You should clean that before the ceremony," I said. He glanced down, then shrugged. "It's fine. No one will notice." That was the point. No one ever did. I walked away before the quiet in my chest could turn into something loud. The hallway blurred at the edges, colors bending together until all I saw was motion. People moving, flowers swaying, doors closing. My feet took me outside again, past the catering staff, past the manicured bushes, until the noise faded behind me. My phone buzzed. I thought it might be the coordinator. It wasn't. It was a name I hadn't seen in years. June. My old roommate from grad school. Her message read, "Did you really end up marrying him?" I froze, staring at the screen. Before I could reply, another message came through. "You remember what he used to call you, right? Plan B." The words hit harder than I expected. They landed in the space between my ribs and stayed there, sharp and cold. I scrolled up, reread the message, hoping I'd misread it. Plan B. Not backup. Not second choice. An insurance policy. The garden around me blurred. Someone laughed inside. Celine again. That easy laugh they used to char professors and men twice her age. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. I wasn't the fallback. I was the cover-up. The realization came quietly, like a whisper through glass. I sank onto the edge of the stone fountain, the one decorated with carved angels holding empty bowls. My reflection trembled in the water, fragmented by the wind. I wanted to throw my phone in, to watch the screen vanish under ripples, but I couldn't. I needed the evidence. I needed the proof. I opened the message thread again. My thumbs hovered over the keys, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? Yes, I married him. Yes, I believed him when he said I was different. Yes, I ignored the way he looked at my sister. The phone slipped slightly from my hand, catching the sunlight before I grabbed it again. My breathing came slow and uneven. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed, marking the hour. The sound made it real. In a few hours, I was supposed to walk down that aisle, smile, promise things I knew were already broken. I stared at the path leading back to the building. The windows glittered, too bright to look at directly. Every laugh, every cheer inside felt rehearsed. I wonder how long they had been practicing this performance. Him, my mother, Celine. Maybe the wedding wasn't for me at all. Maybe it was a brand campaign. Another story Preston could tell. A bee landed on my wrist. I didn't move. Its tiny wings vibrated, delicate, unbothered. I envied it. When I finally stood, the phone was still in my hand, screen lit with the message. I opened the Notes app instead. The cursor blinked at the top, waiting. I typed, "If I leave today." I paused. The words looked too final, too real. My reflection in the phone screen looked older than it should have, like a woman who had stayed silent 1 year too many. I started again. "If I leave today, no one will chase me. They'll call it nerves, not freedom." I typed until the thoughts stopped shaking, until the list looked like a plan, not a panic. Then I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my pocket. Footsteps echoed behind me. Preston's voice followed, smooth as ever. "Arlena, everyone's waiting for you." I turned slowly. He was smiling again, as if nothing had happened, as if we hadn't just rewritten the meaning of together. "You smell like her," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "Grapefruit and vanilla." For a second, something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe guilt, but then it vanished. "You're imagining things," he said, too quickly. "You're overthinking as usual." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. The distance between us was small but enough. Enough for the air to shift. Enough for me to understand that whatever we had built was already hollow. "Arlena," he said, his tone rehearsed, the one he used for clients and interviews. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "You have no idea how easy this just became." He frowned, confused, but I didn't explain. I didn't need to. When he left, I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that hurts on the way out. My pulse steadied. My palms stopped shaking. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to clarity. I stood there in the garden, surrounded by flowers that smelled too sweet, and thought about everything I had ignored. The comments, the choices, the quiet replacements. He mocked me when he didn't love me. What will he do now that I almost believe he does? The hall smelled like lilies and floor polish, like too many secrets covered in perfume. The guests filled every row, their chatter a low hum beneath the organ's soft rhythm. I stood at the end of the aisle, veil trembling slightly with each breath I took. The lights were too bright, the air too heavy, and the silence too watchful. It wasn't excitement, it was surveillance. My heart pounded in time with the music. Step forward, pause, smile. Every movement rehearsed, practice for the cameras, the guests, the family. My hands felt cold even under the gloves. The white bouquet trembled slightly, petals brushing against the lace that suffocated my skin. The faint scent of pecans drifted through the air, sharp and sweet. I knew that smell instantly. I had spent days begging the planner to remove them from the menu. "No pecans, I'm allergic," I had said more than once. But the cake, displayed proudly near the altar, shimmered under the light, brown, glossy, decorated with crushed pecans like confetti. I leaned toward my mother. I told them about the nuts. I whispered, keeping my voice calm. Lorraine smiled without turning her head. It's tradition, dear. Don't ruin this day. Tradition. The word was poison-dressed as civility. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. I had learned long ago that speaking truth in this family meant being labeled difficult. The organ swelled again, and the guests rose as the officiant began the ceremony. Preston stood waiting at the altar, handsome, confident, unaware, or maybe unconcerned, that my chest was rising too fast to breathe. His eyes met mine, steady and public. He smiled the way people smile when they're selling something. When I reached the altar, he took my hand and whispered, "Let's just get through this, all right?" I nodded. The priest began speaking, words about unity and love, about patience and sacrifice. The irony tasted bitter. "Do you, Preston Gage, take this woman?" Preston interrupted with a laugh, loud and sharp enough to slice through the music. "Can you believe she's in white?" He looked around at the crowd, grinning. "Like a pagan cream, right?" The sound that followed wasn't silence. It was worse. It was gasps, stifled laughter, the rustle of programs being lowered. Somewhere in the back, a man chuckled. Someone whispered, "Did he just—" My ears rang. My body went perfectly still. My mother's smile faltered for the first time. Celine covered her mouth, pretending shock while hiding a smirk. Preston looked proud of himself, as though he'd just delivered the best punchline of his life. I heard myself breathing. The sound was steady, slow. My vision narrowed until I could see only him. The man who had promised love and given humiliation. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I took one step back, then another. The priest stammered, trying to recover. "Let us continue." "No," I said quietly. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The microphone caught it, echoed it through the speakers. Every head turned. Every whisper stopped. Preston frowned. "Arlena, don't start." I lifted my veil. The air hit my face, cool and sharp. My voice stayed even. "This isn't a ceremony. It's a circus." I looked at him, then at the rows of expectant faces. "And I'm not your clown." No one moved. The pianist's hands froze mid-note. The organ buzzed softly in the silence. A glass clinked somewhere behind us, and that small sound made everything real. Preston's mouth opened, but no words came. His confidence cracked. His posture stiffened. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked small. Lorraine whispered, "Arlena, please. Don't do this in front of everyone." "In front of everyone?" I repeated. "That's the only way you ever notice me." The words tasted like metal, sharp and freeing. I took the bouquet and set it down carefully at the edge of the altar. My gloves trembled as I removed them, finger by finger, laying them on the marble floor. The white fabric looked too pure for this place. Turning slowly, I faced the aisle. Every step echoed. The click of my heels against the floor sounded louder than the vows that would never be said. Faces blurred on either side. Friends, co-workers, strangers with open mouths. Some pitied me. Some recorded. All watched. I walked past my mother. She reached out, but I moved around her hand like it was a wall. Celine's perfume lingered as I passed her row. She smiled faintly, a flash of teeth. No sympathy. At the door, I stopped for a breath. The stained glass above cast fragments of red and gold across the floor, spilling light over my dress. I didn't feel holy. I felt awake. The usher at the back hesitated, unsure whether to open the door. I reached for it myself. "Don't bother," I said softly. "I can let myself out." The heavy door creaked open, and sunlight poured in, warm, blinding, real. Behind me, voices began to rise. My name echoed once, twice, from different directions, but no one followed. They were too busy trying to decide how to react, how to look good in the aftermath. Outside, the world smelled of rain on concrete and cut flowers. My veil caught the wind, fluttering behind me like a flag of surrender, or maybe victory. I kept walking, down the church steps, past the waiting cars, past the photographers frozen in disbelief. Someone shouted my name again, softer this time, like a plea. I didn't turn around. They thought I was too weak to walk away. I was already gone. The cold tile floor in the back lounge sent a chill through my bare feet. My shoes had been abandoned somewhere between the altar and the hallway, their straps cutting into my skin one last time before I left them behind. The fabric of my dress clung to my legs, damp with sweat and shame. The hum of the air conditioning buzzed louder than any voice dared to in the chapel. I sat on the edge of the leather couch, the same one where I once took engagement photos with Preston, smiling for the camera, believing the backdrop meant something permanent. The silence around me now felt less like peace and more like punishment. The door creaked. I didn't flinch. I knew who it was before she spoke. "Arlena," my mother said gently, as if her tone could erase the last hour. "I just want to talk." I didn't respond. I watched her heels click across the floor, deliberate and graceful, like everything else she choreographed in this family. She placed a manila folder on the coffee table in front of me and slid it forward like it was a menu. "I know you're overwhelmed," she continued. "We all are. But this," she tapped the folder lightly, "needs to be handled." I stared at it, then at her. Handled. It's just the final invoice. The planner needed someone to be responsible. I opened a folder slowly. Inside were copies of contracts, signatures, itemized lists of centerpieces, cake design, audio rentals, lighting. At the bottom, balance due, $38,700. My name was printed in bold. "You put this in my name," I said, my voice low, controlled. "You signed it, honey," she said, smiling like I'd forgotten. "When we first set the date, I signed a guest list." "You signed everything," another voice cut in. "Edgar." He stepped into the room like he owned it, like he always did. "We were clear from day one. You wanted the wedding. You said yes. This is what it costs." "You mean the humiliation?" I asked. "Is that itemized too?" He shrugged. "You walked out. That's your choice. But it's your mess now." Celine appeared in the doorway, arms folded, leaning casually. If she wanted to blow it up in front of 300 people, she should at least pay for the fireworks. I turned to her slowly. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" She raised an eyebrow. "What? I'm just being fair." "Fair," I repeated, tasting the word like something spoiled. The room spun slowly, not from dizziness, but from clarity. I reached for my phone, opened my banking app. My hand was steady even as my heart pounded. The joint account Preston insisted we open. "To make it easier," he'd said. Now showed a balance of 0. I scrolled to the last transaction. A withdrawal. 30 minutes before the ceremony. Every cent moved into an account I didn't recognize. I looked at Edgar. "You let him drain my account." He didn't deny it. He said you'd approved it. Honeymoon expenses. You know how these things work. I laughed once. Just once. The sound was short and dry. You made me pay, I said quietly, to humiliate me. Lorraine's expression didn't change. She still looked composed, like a news anchor reporting bad weather. We expected you to follow through. Everyone did. We've all made sacrifices. I pulled a flash drive from my clutch, placed it on the table, next to the invoice. This holds copies of every email, every text, every wire transfer, including the one that emptied my account, including Preston's messages about why he picked me. Edgar's jaw clenched. Send it to the lawyer, I said. Have him explain the meaning of financial fraud to the family. Lorraine's voice dropped. There's no need for threats. There's no need for weddings either, I replied. But here we are. Celine scoffed. Still dramatic, even without a dress to twirl in. I stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkled fabric of my ruined gown. My feet stung as they pressed against the cold floor. But I didn't wince. I looked at them all, my mother, my stepfather, my sister, and saw the same thing in each face. Discomfort wearing the mask of disappointment. You all knew, I said. You didn't just let it happen. You helped. Lorraine stepped forward. Don't be ungrateful. We gave you everything. No, I said. You gave me just enough to control me. I didn't take the folder. Didn't pick up the flash drive. I left it there like evidence at a crime scene. I walked to the door barefoot, each step quieter than the one before. Edgar called after me, voice stern. You'll regret this, Arlena. I paused, hand on the handle. If you think I'm still the bride, I said, not turning back. You're wrong. I opened the door slowly. The hallway outside was empty, still. I'm your future plaintiff. The elevator descended one floor at a time, slow and mechanical, as if mimicking the pace of my unraveling. I stood barefoot, blistered, the skin on my heels raw from the shoes I had abandoned upstairs. Shoes I'd only worn for 30 minutes before walking away from the life they were supposed to usher me into. I'm your future plaintiff. Those words had come out of me like breath after drowning, ugly, unfiltered, necessary. They still echoed inside me, loud and soft at the same time, clinging to the walls of my chest. The elevator doors opened to a quiet I hadn't known in days. The reporters were gone, the morning sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I stepped out. Nothing but a crumpled dress, red hands, and a name they'd all just learned how to say. I climbed into the rideshare without makeup, without jewelry, without an apology, and without a plan. 2 days passed like weather. I didn't eat, didn't turn on the TV. The curtains stayed closed, the air in my apartment thick with breath I didn't realize I was holding. My body sat on the bed, but my mind floated somewhere above the city. I was weightless, and not in the good way. More like an empty bag caught in the wind, tossed, forgotten, somewhere between lost and useless. The silence wasn't comforting. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that follows a gavel, that fills a room when the truth lands like a verdict. You wait for something, applause or grief, but nothing comes. Just finality. Then ping. My phone lit up like it had been waiting for this moment to strike. The notification came from Instagram. Runaway Bridezilla. Sponsored by Cake Regret. I blinked. The caption didn't make sense. Until it did. The thumbnail was me. My back, to be exact. A still of my veil suspended midair. The moment caught like some cinematic tragedy. Except they had added sound effects. Cartoon footsteps. Oinking. A laugh track, like it was a sitcom. The caption scrolled underneath the video. Cheeky and cruel. I'll you be mine? Or just run? It had 2.4 million views. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. I already knew what they saw. The comment section was a wildfire. Yikes! What did he see under the veil? Bet she planned the whole exit to go viral. At least she saved the cake. Empowering, I guess. This is what happens when daddy issues meet Pinterest. My phone slipped from my hand. It bounced off the comforter, but I didn't flinch. My body stayed still. Eyes open, mouth closed, skin cold. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just existed, like a prop left behind after a scene ends. They had turned me into content. I wasn't a woman, not even a bride. Just a clip, a soundbite, a joke, a new ping, another message, then another. The inbox piled up like snow, light, endless, suffocating. Proud of you for walking out. You're a hero. Can I use this on my podcast? Let's talk collab. You'd kill on TikTok. My pain had become motivational. My collapse an aesthetic. I had turned into a self-help carousel people could scroll past while waiting for coffee. And then I saw her name. Delilah. My throat caught. Finally, I opened the message, bracing for a lifeline. Hey, just saw the clip. I didn't make it, but I didn't stop it either. I need my job, AR. I hope you understand. Understand that she stood beside me while I was zipped into a dress I never chose, that she watched them mic me up, frame the lighting, choreograph the trauma, that she stayed silent while they packaged my humiliation like a trailer. I typed fast. Tell me you didn't help edit that. No reply. I tried again. You stood next to me while they fit the dress. You took notes. You knew everything. Still nothing. I hovered over the message, then deleted it. Not because I forgave her, because I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had made her decision. She had chosen survival over loyalty. That's the part no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always come with a knife. Sometimes it comes in lowercase text, no punctuation, and a polite request for understanding. I looked up at the mirror on the opposite wall. The glow from my phone cast strange shadows on my face, highlighting the exhaustion in my cheeks, the weight under my eyes. I looked older, worn out, like someone who had walked through fire and didn't care if her dress was still burning. I reached for the phone again, my hand steady this time. I played the video. I made myself watch. I listened to the fake snorts, the crowd laughing emojis, the montage of my retreat, scored like a comedy sketch. My mother's half smile, Celine clapping like she was at a gala, Preston shaking hands like it was a campaign fundraiser. I watched it all, and then I opened my laptop. My fingers felt like someone else's, detached, but they knew what to do. I opened the raw footage from the photographer's drive. Unedited, unscripted, just the ceremony, the full ceremony. I uploaded it. No filters, no overdubs, no hiding. The caption was short. Here's what really happened. Because I'm not a meme. I'm a witness. I didn't add hashtags. I didn't care who shared it. I didn't care if it flopped or exploded. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. I leaned back as the screen dimmed. My own reflection faded into the dark. They had tried to turn my story into their product, their profit. So I gave it away for free. Before they could sell it, I burned it into the record myself. The video had been live for 6 days. My phone had stopped buzzing on the first. The silence afterward felt heavier than the noise. I didn't track the views. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. What mattered was that the truth was out there, no edits, no captions, no laugh tracks. Just the sound of my heels against marble, and a man's cruelty echoing through sacred space. When the invitation came for the Gage Foundation's charity gala, I almost laughed. They called it an event to support women in crisis. Preston was listed as the keynote speaker. His photo smiled from the bottom of the email. Hands clasped, chin lifted, haloed by the Gage logo. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and began to plan. The night of the gala, the city pulsed with lights. Cars pulled into the circular drive of the downtown hall. Donors spilling out in gowns and tuxedos. The building glowed like a trophy. Inside, everything gleamed. Crystal glasses, marble floors, walls lined with photos of happy families shaking hands with men like Preston. He stood on stage under a chandelier, microphone in hand. "We're honored to celebrate women tonight," he said, "especially those who've overcome hardship with grace." I almost smiled. Grace. He loved that word. It always meant obedience dressed as virtue. I waited in the back of the hall near the tech booth. I could hear his voice through the speakers, smooth, confident, rehearsed. The same tone he'd used when he convinced me to trust him, when he convinced my mother that marrying him was stability, not strategy. When the applause rose, I walked in. The guards didn't move. The donors turned their heads, curious but polite. I wore a navy suit, not a gown. My hair was pinned back. I looked like someone who belonged, because for once I did. The projector hummed softly as I stepped past the rows of tables. I could feel eyes tracing my path, recognition spreading like a slow infection. Preston froze mid-sentence when he saw me. "Arlena," he said, tone soft but forced. You look well." "Do I?" I asked, walking past him toward the podium. It's hard to tell from the viral clips. Nervous laughter rippled across the crowd. Someone whispered, "That's her." I turned toward the tech operator. "I'll take it from here," I said. He hesitated, then stepped aside. I held up a small flash drive. "You've all seen the meme," I said, voice steady. "But here's the full film." I didn't wait for permission. The lights dimmed as the screen behind us flickered to life. The sound filled the hall, unfiltered, unedited. Preston's voice. His real voice. "She's not the dream," he said, laughing on the recording. "She's the brand safe pick. A sympathy vote. People love a story about a fixer-upper." Gasps spread through the audience. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. Then Celine's voice followed, playful, unmistakable. "Well, she's used to being backup, right?" A few heads turned toward the front table, where Celine sat, her face drained of color. The video continued. Preston again, talking to my mother. "You keep her calm, Lorraine. She's emotional, but she'll settle. You've done it before." And there on screen was the footage from the ceremony, the very clip that had gone viral. But this time, the camera panned wider. It caught the front row. It caught Celine smirking. It caught my mother clapping. The audience shifted uncomfortably. A woman near the back whispered. She was laughing. Another added. They all were. Preston's voice cracked. "That's enough," he said. He stepped forward, hand outstretched like he could still control the narrative. I didn't move. I let the last few seconds play. The part where I lifted my veil. The moment I said, "This isn't a ceremony. It's a circus." The lights came back up. The room looked smaller now. The donors' faces were pale, stiff. Some avoided my eyes. Others stared, frozen between pity and awe. Lorraine's pearl necklace glinted, under the chandelier. She tried to speak, but nothing came. Preston tried to recover, voice trembling. You don't understand. This was taken out of context. No, I said quietly. This is the context. He looked at me, eyes wide, the charm gone. What do you want, Arlena? Money? Attention? I wanted respect, I said. You traded it for applause. He opened his mouth again, but the sound system crackled, distorting his words until they faded under the weight of silence. The same silence that had filled the church, the same silence that followed my exit. I turned toward the audience. They planned a campaign, I said, my voice calm even. I planned an escape. No one clapped. Not yet. I walked back to the podium, placed the flash drive there, and looked at Preston one last time. His face was flushed, jaw tight. He looked like every man who thought power could outlast truth. Keep it, I said softly. You'll need it for your statement. Then I walked out. The hallway outside was cool, empty. My heels clicked against the tile, each sound sharper than applause. Behind me, the noise began, whispers, shifting chairs, the beginnings of a reckoning. I didn't wait to hear it. Outside, the air tasted clean for the first time in weeks. I breathed deeply, filling my chest with something other than pain. Turns out, when you give people silence, they finally hear what was always there. A month after the gala, Denver felt quieter. Or maybe it was just me. The world had moved on to new scandals, news stories. The headlines had shifted, and my name had finally stopped trending. Silence had found me again. But this time it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like permission. The morning mail sat in a neat stack by my door. Bills, flyers, and one small package wrapped in silver paper. No return address, but I didn't need one. The handwriting on the label was unmistakable, precise, elegant, detached. My mother's. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside, a photo frame wrapped in tissue paper and a note. The smell of her perfume clung to both, powder and rosewater, like a memory that refused to fade. The photo was from the wedding. Everyone stood perfectly posed. Preston, Celine, my mother, Edgar. The guests arranged like ornaments. The flowers looked fresh, the lighting divine. It could have been the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Except for one detail. I wasn't in it. The space where I had stood that day had been cropped out. The note was short. Hope you're finding peace. We've moved forward. Moved forward. The words were sharp, efficient, final. Not an apology, not an olive branch, just a declaration that I no longer existed in their version of history. I set the frame down and looked at it again. The photo was beautiful. Too beautiful. That kind of beauty costs truth. For a moment, I wanted to throw it away. But I didn't. I placed it on the counter, face down, and opened the drawer where I had kept a sealed envelope for years. The one from my father. I had found it after his funeral, tucked inside an old book he loved. The handwriting was his, slanted, uneven, alive. I had never been ready to open it. Until now. The seal cracked easily. Inside, just one page, yellowed and folded in thirds. Arlena, the world will give you two things, silence and noise. You can't control which comes first, but you can decide what fills the space between. Speak when it matters. Walk away when it doesn't. Don't mistake their comfort for your belonging. Love doesn't need witnesses. The tears didn't come. They stayed where they were, soft and still. I read the letter again, slower this time, tracing the curve of his handwriting with my fingertip. He'd written those words years before any of this, yet somehow he knew. Maybe he always knew what kind of family I'd grow up in. Maybe he saw the fractures before I learned to name them. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the frame that once held the photo. I set it upright on the shelf where light could touch it. The picture had shown what they wanted the world to see. The letter showed what I needed to remember. The phone buzzed once on the counter. A text from Delilah. I saw what you did at the gala. I hope one day we can talk. I'm sorry. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to explain. Some bridges don't burn. They simply stop leading anywhere. Instead, I wrote a single line in my notebook. Forgiveness doesn't need witnesses either. Later that week, I drove west toward Evergreen. The lake house I had rented sat quietly at the edge of the water, surrounded by pine and fog. The air smelled like rain and cedar. It was the kind of silence that didn't echo, it absorbed. I walked to the shoreline barefoot. The ground was damp, cold against my skin. The surface of the lake shimmered faintly, catching fragments of sunlight through the clouds. I thought about everything I had lost. The wedding, the family, the version of myself that used to apologize for existing. I thought about the video, the whispers, the looks, all the noise they made trying to drown me. And then I thought about the moment I stood up in that church and said, "I'm not your clown." That single sentence had changed the shape of my life. It was the sound that started everything and ended everything all at once. I closed my eyes and listened to the water lapping at the rocks. It sounded steady, familiar, free. I whispered to no one in particular. I wasn't erased. I was reborn without their permission. The wind shifted, carrying the words across the lake like a small confession. I didn't need anyone to hear it. Saying it was enough. When I walked back toward the house, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. No veil, no jewelry, no pretense. Just a woman standing on her own 2 feet. Inside, the letter on the shelf glowed softly in the late afternoon light. The ink had faded, but the words were still strong. The photo, now lying face down on the counter, no longer bothered me. Maybe my mother had done me a favor. Maybe the picture was perfect without me, because I was no longer standing behind anyone. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes walking away isn't a failure. It's the moment you finally choose yourself. Have you ever been written out of your own story? Have you ever had to fight just to exist in the room? Let me know in the comments. If this story struck a nerve or a memory, don't forget to subscribe. There's more where this came from. Stories about truth, survival, and finally being seen.